I still have the ring. It's sitting in my jewelry box right now. This beautiful 2-carat diamond that I thought meant forever. Sometimes I take it out just to remind myself how stupid I was, how completely, utterly blind. My name is Ruby, and I'm 44 years old. 3 years ago, I thought I was getting married to the love of my life. Instead, I found out I was the other woman in someone else's marriage. And the worst part, I had no idea. I met David at a conference in Chicago. I was there for work. I'm a marketing director for a tech company. And he was presenting on digital transformation strategies. He was handsome in that distinguished way, salt and pepper hair, really good at commanding a room. When he came up to me at the networking mixer afterward, I felt like the luckiest woman there. I noticed you asking really smart questions during my presentation, he said, handing me a glass of wine. Ruby, right? I saw your name tag. We talked for 3 hours that night, about work, about life, about everything. He told me he lived in Denver, which was only a 4-hour drive from my place in Salt Lake City. He said he traveled a lot for consulting work. He seemed so genuine, so interested in what I had to say. At 41, I'd been single for 2 years after a bad breakup, and I'd honestly started to think maybe I'd missed my chance at real love. We exchanged numbers, and he called me the very next day, not texted, called. Who does that anymore? It felt old-fashioned and romantic. For the first few months, we had this long-distance thing that felt like a fairy tale. He'd drive down to Salt Lake every other weekend, or I'd go up to Denver. He always wanted to stay at my place when he came to visit, which I thought was sweet. He said he liked being in my space, seeing how I lived. When I went to Denver, we'd stay at nice hotels. He said his apartment was being renovated and was a complete mess. I should have known something was wrong right there. What kind of renovation takes 8 months? But I was so caught up in how he made me feel. He'd bring me flowers every time he visited. He remembered everything I told him. He'd text me good morning and good night every single day. He made me feel like I was the center of his world. The sex was incredible too. I'm not going to lie about that. He was attentive and passionate, and he made me feel beautiful in a way I hadn't felt in years. He'd trace my face with his fingers and tell me I was the most amazing woman he'd ever met. He said I was different from anyone he'd ever been with. I guess that part was true, in the most horrible way possible. About 6 months in, I started pushing to meet his friends, his family. He always had excuses. His parents lived across the country. His friends were all work colleagues, and he liked to keep his personal life separate. He was private, he said. He'd had his heart broken before, and learned to be careful about mixing his worlds. I understood that. I really did. I'd been hurt before too. So I backed off and just enjoyed what we had. He started talking about the future pretty early on. By month 4, he was saying things like, when we're living in the same city, and when we take that trip to Italy we talked about. He made it sound like it was just a matter of time before we figured out the logistics. I was already imagining one of us relocating. I was ready to leave Salt Lake for him. The proposal happened on a Friday night in February. He'd driven down for the weekend, and we'd gone to this little Italian restaurant we both loved. He seemed nervous all through dinner, which wasn't like him. David was always so confident, so in control. We came back to my apartment, and I was opening a bottle of wine when he got down on one knee right there in my kitchen. "Ruby," he said, and his voice was shaking. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. You've changed my entire life. Will you marry me?" The ring was gorgeous. Classic solitaire setting. Exactly what I would have picked for myself. I said yes, obviously. I was crying and laughing, and I felt like my heart might explode from happiness. We made love that night, and he kept whispering, "my fiancé," in my ear. I'd never felt so complete. The next morning, we started talking about wedding plans. He wanted something small, he said. Just us and a few close friends. Maybe even elope. He said he'd been married before, briefly, in his 20s. And the big wedding thing wasn't important to him. What mattered was us. I was fine with that. I'd never been the type to dream about a huge wedding anyway. We talked about maybe going to Napa Valley, finding a little vineyard, making it romantic and intimate. But then he started getting weird about timing. He said he had some big work projects coming up, and maybe we should wait until the fall. Then it was winter because the holidays were too stressful. Then it was spring because he was dealing with some family stuff. I started to get frustrated, but every time I brought it up, he'd reassure me. He'd hold me and tell me he couldn't wait to be my husband, that he just wanted everything to be perfect. He'd plan these amazing weekends for us, surprise me with little gifts, be so loving that I'd feel guilty for doubting him. The red flags were there, but I explained them all away. He never answered his phone when he was with me, but he said he wanted to focus on us completely when we were together. He was vague about his work schedule, but consulting was unpredictable like that. He didn't want me posting photos of us on social media, but he was a private person, and honestly, I wasn't big on social media anyway. The thing that should have been the biggest red flag was how he compartmentalized everything. In 18 months together, I never once talked to him when he was at home in Denver, unless it was planned in advance. He said he had terrible cell service at his apartment and preferred to call me from his office or his car. When I suggested maybe getting him on my phone plan or looking into a signal booster, he'd change the subject. I never got a single spontaneous call or text from him on weekends when he wasn't with me. He said weekends were when he caught up on work and ran errands, and he didn't like to be on his phone. It was his way of staying balanced. God, I was so stupid. How did I not see it? The truth came out on a Tuesday in March. We'd been engaged for over a year at that point, and I was getting really frustrated about the wedding planning. Every time I brought up setting a date, he'd find a reason to postpone. I'd started to wonder if he was having second thoughts, if maybe he regretted proposing. I decided to surprise him. I knew he had a consulting gig in Denver that week, so I took a couple days off work and drove up there. I was going to show up at his hotel, take him out for a nice dinner, maybe have a serious conversation about our future. I'd been to Denver with him before, but always staying at hotels downtown. This time, I decided to drive by his apartment first. I was curious, and I thought maybe the renovation was finally done, and we could actually stay there together for once. He'd given me his address months earlier when I was sending him a birthday gift. It was in this nice neighborhood called Cherry Creek. When I pulled up to the building, it was beautiful. No signs of renovation at all. It looked like a well-maintained complex with a nice courtyard and everything. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. I could call him and tell him I was there, but then it wouldn't be a surprise. I could go knock on his door, but what if he really was working? I didn't want to interrupt something important. Finally, I decided to just go up and see if he was home. If he wasn't, I'd wait in the lobby or go check into a hotel and call him later. I found his apartment number and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. When I got to his door, I could hear voices inside. A TV, maybe, or music. I knocked softly, the door opened, and I was face to face with a woman I'd never seen before. She was pretty, probably in her late 30s, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She looked confused. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for David Morrison," I said. "I'm his fiancé." The woman's face went completely white. She stared at me for what felt like forever, and then she said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "David Morrison. This is his apartment, right? I'm Ruby, his fiancé." She stepped back from the door, and I could see into the apartment behind her. There were family photos on the walls, a couch I'd never seen before, children's toys scattered on the floor. "David is my husband," she said quietly. "We've been married for 12 years. I felt like the ground disappeared underneath me. I actually grabbed the door frame to keep from falling over. "That's not possible," I said. "We've been together for almost 2 years. We're engaged." She looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. It wasn't anger exactly, it was more like recognition, like she was putting pieces together that she didn't want to fit. "What's your name again?" she asked. Ruby Chen." She nodded slowly. "He's told me about you. He said you were a colleague, someone he worked with sometimes." That's when I heard footsteps behind her, and 2 kids came running into the living room, a boy who looked maybe 8, and a girl who was probably 6. They both had David's eyes. "Mom, can we have a snack?" the little girl asked. The woman, David's wife, turned to them and said, "Go play in your rooms for a few minutes, okay? Mommy needs to talk to this lady." They ran off, and she turned back to me. "I think you should come in," she said. Her name was Jennifer. She invited me to sit down on their couch, David's couch, in David's living room, in the home he shared with his wife and children. She made me a cup of tea with shaking hands, and we sat there looking at each other, both of us trying to process what was happening. "How long did you say you've been together?" she asked. "Almost 2 years. We met at a conference in Chicago," she nodded. "He goes to a lot of conferences. I always thought it was just for work." I showed her photos of us together on my phone. Pictures from our trips, from dinners, from quiet mornings in my apartment. She looked at each one carefully, and I watched her face crumble a little more with every image. "He told me he travels for consulting," she said. "He's gone probably 6 days a month, sometimes more." "He comes to see me in Salt Lake City," I said. "Every other weekend, usually." "Salt Lake City," she repeated. "He said he had a big client there, some tech company that required a lot of face-to-face meetings." We sat in silence for a while. I kept looking around the apartment, seeing David's life. His coffee mug in the sink, his jacket hanging by the door, family photos everywhere, David and Jennifer on their wedding day, David holding his babies, David at birthday parties and Christmas mornings and school events. "He proposed to me in February," I said finally. "Last year." Jennifer's face went even paler. "February? We went to Hawaii in February. For our anniversary. He said he wanted to renew our commitment to each other." I felt sick, actually physically sick. I ran to their bathroom and threw up, and Jennifer held my hair back like we were old friends instead of two women whose lives had just been destroyed by the same man. When I came back to the living room, she had my phone in her hands. She'd been looking at our text messages. "He tells you he loves you," she said. "Every day. He tells me that too." We compared stories for 2 hours, the business trips that lined up perfectly with our weekends together, the way he'd go silent for days at a time, which I thought was just his busy work schedule, but was actually him being present with his family. The gifts he brought me that were probably bought during the same shopping trips, where he picked up things for Jennifer and the kids. "Did he ever talk about having children?" Jennifer asked. "He said he wanted kids someday, with me, after we got married." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "He already has kids, our kids. Emma just lost her first tooth last week, and he helped her write a letter to the tooth fairy." I started crying then, really crying, not just for myself, but for her, for those beautiful children playing in the next room who had no idea their father was living a double life. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I honestly don't know." We decided to wait for David to come home. Jennifer called him and asked when he'd be back from his client meeting, and he said around 6. It was 4:30. Those 90 minutes were the longest of my life. Jennifer sent the kids to her mother's house, telling them she needed to have an important conversation with Daddy. We sat in that living room, two women who'd been sharing the same man without knowing it, trying to figure out how we'd both been so blind. "Were there signs?" I asked her. "Maybe," she said. "He's been distant sometimes, more protective of his phone, but he's always traveled for work, so I didn't think much of it. And he's been a good father. He never misses the kids' events when he's in town. He coaches Emma's soccer team." "He coaches soccer?" "Every Saturday morning when he's not traveling." I thought about all those Saturday mornings when I'd wondered what he was doing, when he'd be unreachable until Saturday evening. He was coaching his daughter's soccer team. When we heard his key in the door, Jennifer and I looked at each other. We'd decided she would do the talking initially. I would just sit there, and we'd see what he said when he saw me. "Jen, I'm home," he called out. "Where are the kids?" "In here," she called back. He walked into the living room, talking about his day, something about a difficult client meeting, and then he saw me sitting on his couch. I've never seen someone's face change so completely, so fast. He went from relaxed and happy to absolutely terrified in the span of a second. "Ruby," he said, "what are you doing here?" "I came to surprise you," I said. "Surprise." He looked back and forth between Jennifer and me, and I could see him trying to figure out how much we knew, whether there was still a way to lie his way out of this. "David," Jennifer said, and her voice was steady and cold. "Ruby tells me you two are engaged." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "I can explain," he said. "Please do," Jennifer said. "Explain to me how you proposed to another woman while you're married to me. Explain to me how you've been living with both of us for 2 years. Explain to me how you looked me in the eye last month and told me you loved me more than anything in the world." "It's not what you think," he said, which was maybe the stupidest thing he could have said. "What is it then?" I asked. "Because I think you're a married man who's been lying to me for 2 years. I think you have 2 children that you never mentioned. I think you've been using business trips as an excuse to come sleep in my bed and plan a fake future with me." He sat down heavily in a chair across from us. For a minute, he just put his head in his hands. "I never meant for this to happen," he said finally. "Which part?" Jennifer asked. "The part where you cheated on your wife? Or the part where you proposed to your mistress?" "Don't call her that," he said. "Ruby isn't, it's not like that." "Then what is it like, David?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what I am. I'm the other woman. I'm the one you lied to and used and made promises to that you never intended to keep." He tried to explain, but nothing he said made any sense. He said he loved both of us. He said he'd gotten in too deep and didn't know how to get out. He said he'd been planning to leave Jennifer, but wanted to wait until the kids were older. He said he'd been planning to break up with me, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Every word that came out of his mouth was another lie. I could see it, and Jennifer could see it. He was still trying to manipulate us, still trying to find an angle that would let him keep some piece of the life he'd built on deception. "The ring," I said suddenly. "Where did you get the money for the ring?" He looked confused. "What?" "My engagement ring. It cost at least $10,000. Where did that money come from?" Jennifer turned to look at me. "What did the ring look like?" I described it to her, and her face went white again. "David," she said, "you told me you had to dip into Emma's college fund for her dental work. You said we needed to be careful with money for a few months." He'd used his daughter's college money to buy me an engagement ring, his 6-year-old daughter's future to pay for a symbol of his betrayal. "How could you?" Jennifer's voice trembled with disbelief. "You took money from our child's future to buy a ring for her?" "I was going to pay it back," he insisted. But the desperation in his voice only made it worse. I felt sick again, but this time it was a different kind of sick. It was a mix of anger and pity, not just for myself, but for Jennifer and those kids. I had been so wrapped up in my own heartbreak that I hadn't even considered the real victims in this mess. "You think you can just keep lying and manipulating everyone?" I said, my voice rising. "You think you can have it all? A wife, kids, and a fiancé? You're delusional." He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that same old charm he had used to win me over. "Ruby, please. I love you. I never meant for it to go this far." "Love?" I scoffed. "You don't even know what love is. You've been playing us both like we're characters in your twisted little story." Jennifer was silent, her eyes filled with tears. I could see the pain etched on her face, the betrayal cutting deep. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her I was sorry for what had happened, but I didn't know how. "David, you need to leave," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tears. "You need to figure out what you want, but it can't be both of us. You can't keep lying to everyone." He opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. "No, you need to go. I need time to think, and I need to protect my children from this mess." He stood up, looking lost. "I'll fix this. I promise I'll fix this." "Fix what?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You can't fix a lifetime of lies. You can't fix the fact that you've shattered 2 lives with your selfishness." He looked at me, and for a moment I thought he might actually understand. But then he turned back to Jennifer, desperation in his eyes. "I'll do better. I'll be a better husband. Just give me a chance." "You've had your chances," she said, her voice firm. "You've had years. I can't trust you anymore." He left the apartment, and the silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was in a fog, the reality of what had just happened crashing down on me. I had been so sure of my future, so convinced that I was finally going to have the life I had always wanted. But now, I was just another woman who had been deceived by a man who couldn't be honest with himself or anyone else. Jennifer and I sat in silence for a long time, both of us lost in our thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "I'm so sorry you got caught up in this. You didn't deserve any of it." "I didn't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea he was married. I thought he was being honest with me." "I believe you," she said softly. "I can't imagine how painful this is for you." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I thought he was the one. I thought I was finally going to be happy. "You will be," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "You deserve better than this. We both do." In that moment, I realized that I wasn't alone in this. Jennifer and I were both victims of David's lies, and while our paths had crossed in the most painful way possible, we could find strength in each other. As I left her apartment that night, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had been broken, but I wasn't defeated. I would heal and I would move on. I still have the ring, but it no longer holds the same power over me. It's just a reminder of a lesson learned the hard way. I deserve honesty, love, and respect, and I won't settle for anything less again.